This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leader, today I'm honored to have Dr. Michael Housman on the show. He is a longtime technologist and a leader and founder of AI Accelerator. So we're going to talk a little bit about AI and how that's changing the narrative and how we can learn and stay on top of that as leaders, especially here in tech. Anyway, with all that being said, Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into technology in general, and what is it that you do today?
Yeah, so it was not a typical path. I was an academic. Once upon a time, I got a PhD in econometrics. I had the option of going into academia and writing journal articles and going for tenure, but I did have some foresight and a sneaking suspicion that data that was being thrown off by applications and our mobile phones, I kind of suspected this is going to be really valuable. And I love building models. I'm a data geek at heart. And so instead of doing research, I decided to join industry and start helping startups build out machine learning AI platforms. And when I started doing that 15 years ago, there were not that many of us. I think it was the single digit thousands. I've looked at some of the stats and, it was a very small community and the tools weren't nearly as robust as they are now. But I started doing it for a company that was using data and analytics to help hiring. So I got a taste of it in HR technology. And what we realized was that when you would have applicants jump through an online assessment, you gauge their knowledge, skills, and abilities, render a score to hiring managers, and they use that score, green, yellow, red, to make hiring decisions. They ended up with better employees. They stayed on the job longer. They performed better. And so for me, that was kind of a big aha moment, which is, listen, humans are great, but we have all these biases when it comes to decision making. And there's a whole field of behavioral economics about that. And what happens when you couple that with algorithms and machines is we make better decisions. And that has been born through in my technology career. I've built models and platforms to help with lending decisions, fraud detection, all sorts of different facets, all these different elements of decision making. And I kind of realized, hey, human plus machine better than either one alone. And then 3 years ago, ChatGPT kind of blew this whole world up and everyone sat up and took notice and said, wait, where's this AI thing come from? And I keep telling people like, no. We were doing this for 15 years, but the technology has gotten robust enough that now it can be consumer facing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I can think back to, we talk about lending decisions. There's a lot of tools out there. When Lending Tree like really popped, a few years back, they were making decisions about where to route, applications to based off what marries with vendors and using technology to kind of do that. And I remember that being kind of like the first tech company that I kind of followed that was using algorithms to kind of make business decisions. And then you get into the movie Moneyball, where people are taking data, for sports, and that's becoming even, more prevalent, today than ever before. So how is it that you've seen kind of this advent of the really popularity of like ChatGPT and, Gemini and all the AI tools kind of taking mainstream now? And how important is that underlying data that we have to all that?
Yeah, the data is that oil that fuels, it's the gas that fuels all of these models. And I work with companies all the time, and their first objection right off the bat is, listen, our data is not in great shape. And literally, I was on a call half an hour before you and I connected with a company that said, we're going on a massive data journey. And, there's no way around it. You have to go on it. Usually what you do, and I talk about this in my upcoming book, and we can talk more about that, is you say, listen, we're going to break this journey in two. And first, we're going to say, listen, the data stays the same. Are there quick wins and opportunities that you could lean into without touching your data at all? And the good news is right now, there are so many off-the-shelf tools available to help with, large language models, deep research, agentic tools, multimedia creation of image, video, music, that the answer is always yes. There's always some tool that off the shelf, if you put them in your employees' hands, you'd get them to really sprint. And while you do that, you go on that data journey at the same time, because it is critical. And what that data journey unlocks, if you do it right, and it's painful, it's like, I'm a fitness guy. So it's like getting fit. You can't just go in the gym once and be like, okay, I'm fit now. It's got to be a constant, consistent thing. But when they do it the right way, it unlocks all sorts of transformational projects. And it allows you to think, hey, how could we disrupt our space? If we were AI native and a startup coming in right now, what could we build that no one else could build? And so that's, anyhow, long answer to your question, like data is critical and everyone has to go on that journey. But the good news is, I guarantee every company has low hanging fruit and opportunities they could be pursuing, regardless of the quality of their data.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, you can always, you learn a lot going through those data journeys too about your business when you
Yeah.
actually start to uncover it. And I think sometimes the lessons that you learn are just as valuable as the data itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and that's a great point, and one that people don't realize is that by mapping that data, you get a really in-depth understanding of your workflow flows, your processes, your technology, what your people are doing. And that inevitably is going to shape the kind of the skyscraper you build on top of that data foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing when you go through those processes. Um, the things that you uncover, when you talk about workflow and just you thought you had an inefficient workflow. And then as you uncover some of the pieces, you realize like, the data is telling us that we make the same decision way more frequently than we thought we did. Maybe we should automate this in a way that
Mm.
makes more sense. And a lot of times people get confused sometimes with what is AI and what is automation. Where do you see that line being drawn in business workflows?
Yeah, I mean, so, there's a lot of automation that can be done. AI is a tool for automation, but there's
Mhm,
there's other technologies and tools like, robotic process automation. Like, there's ways you can automate stuff without using AI.
mhm.
AI helps to kind of, especially with decisioning, right? When there's ambiguity, look, you can use a Zapier and you can automate business processes very easily, where you just build a drag and drop workflow. But where AI is really helpful is when there's ambiguity. When you have to do sense making, you're looking at a column of data points and you need to try to understand, okay, what do these points generally represent? Where are there outliers? Like, where you would normally need a pair of human eyes, you can now replace that with AI, because at its core, it scales intelligence. So, it starts to cut at the core. It's not just pure automation of something that you do over and over again. That's easy and that's pretty well-worn territory. It now adds a layer of intelligence to those workflows and those automations.
Yeah, so not just if then, but also like decisions about, well, where to go. Um,
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That, like, if you could do if then else statements, that's great. But what fell, if I could be blunt, like RPA was the real robotic process automation. 10 years ago, everyone was like, okay, RPA is going to solve all our problems. And it didn't. And by the way, there's a lot of backlash. These days I
mhm.
present on AI and someone snarky will sometimes take me aside and be like, oh, I remember this. This is RPA 10 years ago. And by the way, it fell apart and it did nothing it was promising. The difference now is now we can handle all those weird corner cases and ambiguities that RPA fell apart with. And so that creates a lot more opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is definitely a difference between what AI is and RPA. And when you think about like, and I think part of it is robots automation is going to do what it's programmed to do. And when there is something that comes up that's unexpected, it doesn't have an answer to what to do with that. Whereas AI, when something comes up that's unexpected, it can go and research and learn and develop a pattern so that now when that question comes back up, it knows how to handle it. And
Yeah.
it's like a self-updating system.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That you can now embed agents that know how to handle ambiguity and can logic their way through a problem the way a human would, right?
Mhm.
As humans, we run into corner cases and ambiguities. Like the whole world is gray. There's very little that's black and white. And the problem, for robotics for longest time just fell apart. Now you can tell an agent, hey, how would you handle this corner case? How would you handle this problem? And it's able to reason its way through. And it even extends to modern day. I read recently and you won't believe this, but the most common use case of ChatGPT and all the LLMs is personal advice. And I didn't
Oh,
realize
wow.
that. And I thought,
Hmm.
yeah, so that's what most people, of course, people are using it to write emails and social media
Yeah, yeah.
posts, but when they bucket this stuff, it's a lot of people navigating hard situations in their lives and turning to AI to try to get some clarity or list pros and cons or just help them reason their way through stuff. And I think that's fast. I know I use it for that personally, and I think it's just fascinating that that's become a very common use case.
No, yeah, I absolutely, and I also use it for like leadership advice too. So if I have like an employee that I need to give like a difficult one-on-one with or a difficult piece of feedback, I'll sometimes ask, Gemini or ChatGPT or whoever, hey, imagine you're this, and I'm giving you this feedback because of this. How would you respond? And then how should I say this differently to get a different response? And try to like
For you. Yeah.
figure out the appropriate ways to handle certain situations that I'm not very good at handling without that.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to you. It's not surprising. You're definitely at the forefront. Not many people are using it. And those stats, I tell everyone, use it as a thought partner because people
Mhm.
don't realize, like, they say, hey, write me this email and here's the information, or write me a document, or here's a legal contract, analyze it. But they don't use it as a strategic thought partner. How do I have a hard conversation with an employee? This is what the landscape is shaping up like in my industry. How should I think about just different strategic angles, building an ecosystem? And it's such an easy win for company leaders, which is
Mm,
just imagine it's not a tool. It's not like Excel. Imagine it's a board member, right? What would you
yeah.
go to a board member with in the way of questions? And it can highlight things that you haven't been thinking about. It can, push back on ideas that it maybe doesn't think are great. Like, no, very few. It's funny you mentioned that, but like very few people statistically are using it in that way. And I'm like, this is the comparison I use. I'll just finish is like it's like people have a Ferrari sitting in their driveway and they're like, "Oh, it's amazing. It can charge my cell phone and it can light up the, garage." And I'm like, "You're missing the point. It's got so much
Yeah.
more potential."
Yeah, I like to think of it as like, I use it as a mentor, whereas a lot of people use it as an admin, you know?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
and
Yes,
it's
that's
like,
exactly
you have a CTO sitting here, you're using it as an admin.
that's a great I may borrow and or steal that line. I love that. The, like,
Yeah,
admin
100%,
mentor.
100% here.
Yeah. That's a great no,
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. That's how they're
yeah.
using it.
So you mentioned earlier that, it's not just AI, it's not just people, but if you put the 2 together, you have like a synergistic approach that can kinda do more than one or the other alone. And I agree with you 100% with that, but where is that going in the future? Like, is it gonna become, a higher percentage of AI and less of people, or is it gonna stay kinda closer to that married 50/50, realm for a while?
Yeah, like, I think you're gonna see more and more automation, you're gonna see more and more AI, and AI will be able to carry out more tasks, but I don't think that necessarily means that there's less and less for humans to do.
Mhm.
I think, A, it allows us to really lean into the human side of what we do, and B, it increases the surface area of kinda tasks we can complete. And I'll give you I don't wanna speak in abstract terms. I'll give you a very concrete example. I talked about hiring. Here's another one. When you're doing fraud detection, what algorithms are good at doing is recognizing patterns in data. So we had a platform to do fraud detection for banks for loans. You apply for a loan, car loan. A lot of people falsify information. When they do that and they get a loan, they basically have stolen money and everyone pays the price. So when we built algorithms initially to help us with fraud detection, when you tell the algorithms find all the fraud, they're really good at finding fraud patterns that have existed already in the data. What they're really bad at is finding new attack vectors that fraudsters are constantly concocting and finding new opportunities to defraud the system and creating new fake employers or coming up with a new way to create a synthetic identity or social security number. So what we did was we married the human with the machine. We had analysts who were on the front lines, who were on the, black internet, like the dark web, and they were basically looking for they were thinking like a fraudster. How could I defraud the system? And they were really creative, and they come up with all these different attack vectors. And then when they found one that was working, they would quickly build it algorithmically so that AI could replicate that search. So any application that came in, it read through thousands or tens of thousands of rules that said, okay, here are the different ways that we know fraudsters can work. So all that to your point, like, well, what are humans going to do? Humans get to do the creative stuff. They get to think like a fraudster. They get to really kind of mine the data in creative ways, and the algorithms can just do the rinse and repeat part, and that humans, frankly, wouldn't want to do and don't have the capacity to do. So all that to say, I don't think the role of humans will be shrinking. I think it's going to use the parts of our brain that make us human, and that's complex problem solving, seeing, thinking creatively, handling and navigating gray areas, and let the algorithms do what they do well, which is pattern matching.
Yeah, I think history kind of tells us that same thing that you're saying there, because you look back to, and I was having this conversation with somebody not too long ago, and we are talking about, you know, industrial revolution and going back in the days, and he was trying to tell me that people are getting dumber. And there's, everybody's getting dumber. We can't do the things. I said, no, we're doing things that we didn't have before, and stopping doing things that we don't need to do anymore. I said, you go back to like, you know, the 1700s, everybody farmed, everybody hunted, and everybody made their own shoes. And we don't do that anymore, for the most part. I mean, we hunt for leisure and for fun, not because of necessity. We don't, farm for necessity for the most part. And we don't make our own shoes. We go and buy them because I don't, if you ask me how to make shoes, I would have no idea because I don't need that skill anymore. I've learned, how to use a computer, which didn't exist. And, it's not that we got dumber. We just changed, of what we're focusing on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I don't know how to read a map. I did once upon a time. I just don't know how to do that anymore. My car, I have a Tesla, it drives itself. My driving skills have probably atrophied over the last couple years. Does that mean I'm getting stupider? Like, no, I'm just focused on the skills that require my attention and, my human brain, and I've offloaded that to machines. And so I think you're 100% right. I will say with the one caveat that because these tools are now doing things like reading and writing, there is some research that suggests that reading and writing and math skills even start to degrade, right? Like you give people problems that they'd encounter in like a college course or whatever it is, they get used to copy pasting and they stop using their brain. And so that worries me a little bit because I do think reading, writing, math, you need to know some pieces of that. But I totally agree that like a lot of the skills that we previously owned, I gladly give it to the AI. Let it do those things. Let me focus on the things that I'm uniquely good at.
Yeah, I definitely think some of those skills do attribute. When you talk about Tesla, I have a daughter that's just learning how to drive, and teaching her how to drive through our car, and we will all have Teslas too. And I just wanted to say, just push the button, get the autopilot, just let it go. But you can't do that on your driver's test. So,
Yeah.
and
No,
also
that's
like
amazing. Yeah.
there's all these
Go ahead.
like cameras and sensors and stuff. So I'm just like, we're trying to cover up the camera while she backs up to turn around. She's like, why would I turn around? Just look at this. I'm like, yeah, but I don't think I can do that on your driver's test.
That's a Yeah, I did wonder. It's funny. I was teaching my 16-year-old son how to drive. And as I was doing this, I was like, am I teaching him a skill that he's not going to need in 5 years? Like, it's possible, right? And there's, by the way, technology. I have to look over the shoulder, and driving and parking was a lot harder when I was 16 than it is right
Yeah.
now. So yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see where all that's going. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at Accelerator, or AI Accelerator, and what is it that how does that help other businesses and people get started when it comes to learning and developing AI when it comes to their business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's really two pieces to it. We call it Academy, which is really around learning and development and education. It's a lot of workshops, keynotes, boot camps to help folks get up the curve, to help businesses kind of develop a strategic view and kind of build out a roadmap. There's a solution side of the business, which is actually implementing and building the technology and helping them on that journey. To be frank, the biggest opportunity and where we spend a lot of our time is focused on the academy and learning and development. And I tell everyone the two challenges you're going to run into, not knowing anything about your organization, it's going to be the data, which you brought up at the beginning, but it's going to be your people. The technology is moving exponentially. the adoption from people is actually pretty flat. And, and that's, so there's a saying I have, which is technology is easy, people are hard. And so when people think AI, they're like, oh my God, I have to hire a bunch of engineers. And the hard part is going to be building all this different, wireframing and APIs. And I'm like, no, 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 no. The hardest part is going to be your people, because people are challenging, they're tricky, changing behavior of a hiring manager of 20 years and saying, oh, by the way, you now need to use these tools to do your job. A lot of that, some flat out refuse. They're like, I'm afraid of this thing. I don't want to train my AI replacement. Some are kind of arrogant and they're like, I've been doing this 20 years. No way it's better than me. So that's where I spend. Yeah. The point is, like, that's where I spend a lot of my time is helping companies talk to their employees, turn that fear into excitement, get them to find those very obvious opportunities, get them to lean into these tools and create like a learning organization. And so that's how at the cost of my own, but I'm doing more online and webinar type work. But the truth is I'm on the road. I'll give, I think, 60 something programs this year. So that means like one a week. I'm flying
Wow.
out to far flung places in the world to teach people about what's happening in AI.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I've been working with some people on AI skills, and it seems like one of the biggest things that's holding them back isn't maybe part of it is reluctance to change, but also it's fear. It's the fear, or maybe they try something early on. Like I was talking to a creative, he was the VP of creative. He was talking about uh, "Oh, yeah, I used, Photoshop to remove backgrounds and things years ago. It's terrible, so I just haven't tried it since." I'm like, "What? You haven't tried it since? And you're an executive in the creative world, and you haven't like, what are you doing?" You're missing out on so many opportunities, like, and I think part of it's just fear. They don't wanna, like, lose their job, or they're fearful of
Yeah.
things changing and not being able to keep up, and things like that. How do you address that?
Yeah. I mean, you have to make the point. I have lots of visuals to show the quality of these systems improves with every release. So
Mhm.
let's say you used ChatGPT 2 years ago and you went on there and you tried to write a funny meme or a poem, and maybe the results were good, maybe they were bad. That doesn't mean, like, 2 years later, it's amazing. It's hit all these benchmarks. Same with image generators. Like, I have designers and marketing folks. They played with it. They said, oh, it's not that photorealistic. Well, guess what? 2 years have come and it is really unbelievable. And marketing teams are really flying. So some of that is painting a picture of technology moving. It's not linear, it's exponential. And people have a problem wrapping their minds around exponential growth. So that's one of the things. The other thing is I try to create light bulb moments. And so that means we take a group of people that have no technical skills or all, no design chops, and I show them, let me show you how I can have you create a 30-second commercial or a deeply researched pitch deck or an agentic go-to-market sales engine. And we'll do it in 90 minutes using a handful of tools and a recipe that we've baked. And those create these light bulb moments where they're like, "Oh my god, like, this is something that would have taken me weeks, maybe months to do, and now I can do it." And in many cases, I'm not even trained to do this work. So, we try to orchestrate those light bulb moments where people realize, like, "Oh man, this is pretty, powerful what it enables." Um, and then I do a lot of storytelling, and I've worked with, I don't even know, there's, hundreds of different companies across the world, and I have lots of stories of what's worked, what hasn't. But every culture is different. Every person is different. So
Mhm.
you have to, there's no magic bullet. There's no one thing you can say to get everyone to lean in. Like, everyone, every company has its own recipe based on their own culture, their mission, their values. And so we try to, like, customize it and personalize it and kind of meet them where they're at.
So you mentioned early on in the conversation that you're writing a book. How many of these stories have made it into that book, and when is that going to be released? What's the story around that book?
I love it. Yeah, I thank you for asking. Yeah, the book's gonna be released March 1st. It's called Future Proof: Transform Your Business with AI or Get Left Behind. You're exactly right. I have been giving these talks for 8 years. The content has constantly evolved as AI has changed. And what I realized is that the talks and keynotes are great, but I can't scale that, right? I can only be in one place at a time. And so the book distills that talk and offers a lot more detail, a lot more stories, a lot more examples, many of which come from my own career, to really kind of unpack these lessons. And so if you can't fly, so, if your company can't book me to go and give a talk to, 60 or 100 employees, the good news is now the book will be available for like 24.99, and you can read it and you can kind of understand what's happening. And the last thing I'll say is, at least on the book, is there's a zillion AI books out there. They tend to be written by technicians for technicians. And I've read as many of them as I could get my hands on. And it's, they have math in there, and it's just like, it's absolutely impenetrable. This is not that. And so if you are coming in and you have no sense of what's going on, you've heard a few things about LLMs, you want to go from 0 to 1, I encourage everyone to pick up a copy because, I think it's kind of funny. I throw jokes in there. Like you can get from how I do a podcast that I'm pretty conversational and entertaining, I hope. So anyhow, I encourage everyone to buy a copy because it really does unpack what's happening in AI in a really accessible, meaningful way.
Yeah, you should definitely launch a podcast to go along with it because you are very personable, and I think the conversation would be very cool to have you kind of talk through it as you go through it as well. Because I think that'd be
Yeah.
a really neat listen for sure. Um,
Yeah, that's the plan. That's like the recipe book that's next on the list, but like book first, and then I'll come to you for tips on how to run a really good podcast.
yeah, sounds good. Use AI to edit your audio for you. That's what I do.
Yeah. Amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I feel like we've talked a lot and learned a lot about how to kind of marry the people with the AI to have the best outcomes. How can people connect with you online, pick up a copy of the book when it comes out, and learn more?
Yeah, so the first stop is my website, michaelhousman.com. Last name spelled Housman, no E. Go there, sign up for my newsletter. We're going to be keeping folks posted with the dates when it gets released. We're going to be sending out links to obviously pre-order or buy the book. The other thing you can do, I do post on LinkedIn. So if you find me on LinkedIn and give me a follow, I'll share all sorts of content around the book and just AI in general. So those are your two best bets. And also, my email address is on the website. I love having these conversations. And so feel free to drop me a line if I can be helpful, or if you want to bring me on site and have me do my thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll link those two in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go there and click through. Michael, again, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, John. It was a pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. Make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.